My stepbrother Marcus slammed the door of his pickup truck and barked at me to get in, his face twisted with disgust after catching me with Ezra the night before. What he didn't know was that this trip to the conversion therapy center would expose a family secret so dark it would bring our entire world crashing down. The rain hammered the windshield like accusations as we sped down the wet streets of suburban Chicago, my hands clenched in my lap, while Marcus gripped the wheel, so hard his knuckles turned white. I was 24, working a dead-end job at a coffee shop to pay for community college classes, still living at home because Mom insisted it was the responsible thing to do. Marcus, 6 years older, had always been the golden boy, the one who followed every rule Dad laid down after he married Mom when I was 10. But last night in Lincoln Park, under the glow of street lamps, Ezra had pulled me close for a quick kiss goodnight, and Marcus had driven by at the worst possible moment. "You're sick, Leo," he had snarled when he dragged me home. "But we're fixing this before Dad finds out." Now here we were, heading to the New Horizons Center on the outskirts of the city, a place I had only heard about in whispered horror stories online. I stared out the window at the blurred strip malls and thought about Ezra, his easy laugh, and the way his dark hair fell across his forehead when he looked at me like I was the only person in the room. We had met in a literature class last semester, two guys who bonded over shared notes and late-night study sessions that turned into something neither of us expected. He was 25, finishing his degree in social work, out to his own family in California and proud of it. I had never told anyone at home. The truck hit a pothole, and Marcus cursed under his breath. "This is for your own good," he muttered, not looking at me. "Mom's already called ahead. They'll make you normal again." Normal. The word burned in my chest. I remembered the first time Ezra held my hand under a movie theater armrest, the warmth that spread through me like sunlight after years of hiding in shadows. I had planned to come out slowly, maybe after graduation, but Marcus had ripped that choice away in one violent second. The center loomed ahead, a low brick building with neatly trimmed lawns and a sign that promised healing through faith and science. My stomach twisted as Marcus parked and yanked the keys from the ignition. "Out," he ordered. Inside, the lobby smelled of stale coffee and disinfectant. A receptionist with a tight smile handed me forms while Marcus hovered like a guard. I filled them out with shaking hands, lying on half the questions because admitting the truth felt like surrender. A counselor named Dr. Harlan appeared, middle-aged with wire-rimmed glasses and a clipboard, and led me to a small room with beige walls and two plastic chairs. Marcus waited outside the door like a sentinel. "Leo, we're here to help you realign with God's design." "Dr. Harlan began, his voice calm and clinical. I wanted to laugh or scream, but I just nodded, my mind racing back to Ezra's text from this morning. "Call me when you can." "I'm worried." I couldn't even answer it with Marcus watching my every move. The session dragged on with questions about my childhood, my father figures, my triggers. Each one felt like a scalpel peeling back layers I wasn't ready to expose. By the time Marcus drove us home in silence, the rain had stopped, but the storm inside me had only begun. I lay awake that night staring at the ceiling of my childhood bedroom, the same posters of baseball players still taped up from when I was 15 and pretending. Ezra's face kept flashing in my mind, his gentle smile the only thing keeping me from shattering. Tomorrow they wanted me back for group sessions. Marcus had already cleared my work schedule without asking. I whispered into the dark, "I won't let them break me," but doubt crept in like the cold air seeping under the window. Little did I know the real fracture was about to split our family wide open, starting with a single phone call I never should have answered. The next morning, Marcus was already waiting by the truck before I even finished my coffee, his eyes avoiding mine as if looking at me hurt him physically. We drove back to New Horizons in the same heavy silence, the city waking up around us with commuters rushing to jobs they hated and kids laughing on their way to school. I kept replaying the moment Marcus had seen me with Ezra, the way his face had gone from shock to fury in a heartbeat. How long had he suspected? Had he followed me? The questions gnawed at me while Dr. Harlan's voice droned on in the group room, surrounded by 5 other men, all staring at the floor like they were waiting for Judgment Day. One guy, a quiet accountant named Paul, shared how his wife had found texts on his phone and sent him here as an ultimatum. I wanted to reach out to him, tell him he wasn't alone, but the rules were strict, No talking outside sessions. During a break, I managed to slip into the bathroom and text Ezra quickly. I'm okay, but stuck. Don't call the house. His reply came instantly. I'm coming to Chicago if you need me. Love you. Those 2 words steadied me until Marcus appeared in the doorway, his jaw tight. Who are you texting? He demanded. I shoved the phone in my pocket and lied. Mom checking in. He didn't believe me, but let it drop, probably because Dr. Harlan was watching. Back in the session, the counselor pushed harder, showing slides about broken family dynamics and how absent fathers or overprotective mothers supposedly caused what he called our condition. I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. My stepdad had been strict but fair, teaching us to hunt and fix cars, always pushing Marcus to be the man of the house. Mom had remarried after my biological father left when I was 5, and she always said Marcus and I were brothers in every way that mattered. But sitting there, I realized how much I had hidden from all of them, how many nights I had cried alone wondering if loving Ezra made me broken. The misunderstanding came that afternoon when Ezra, worried sick, called the house landline. Mom answered and handed the phone to Marcus without thinking. I heard his voice rise from the kitchen. Who is this? Ezra? Stay away from my brother or I swear. I rushed in and grabbed the phone, but the damage was done. Marcus hung up and turned on me. That's the guy from the park, isn't it? You're still talking to him. His betrayal stung deeper than the therapy. Ezra wasn't some phase. He was the first person who made me feel seen. That night at dinner, the tension was thick enough to choke on. Mom pushed food around her plate while Dad lectured about responsibility. Marcus sat across from me, his eyes burning with something I couldn't name, anger mixed with fear maybe. I excused myself early and locked myself in my room, dialing Ezra on video. His face filled the screen, concern etched in every line. Leo, I can drive out tonight. You don't have to do this alone. I wanted to say yes, but the thought of Marcus finding out terrified me. Instead, I whispered, just wait. I'll figure this out. Hanging up left me hollow. The psychological pressure built like a slow wave, each session chipping away at my resolve. I started questioning everything, wondering if maybe they were right and my love for Ezra was just confusion. But then I remembered the way he kissed my forehead after I failed a test, the quiet strength he gave me without demanding anything. By the end of the week, I was exhausted, but something inside me refused to break. Marcus drove me home again, and for the first time he spoke more than 2 words. I went through something like this once, he muttered. I froze, but he clammed up immediately. That tiny crack in his armor was the first hint that the secret wasn't just mine. The next morning, I found an old photo album in the basement while looking for a charger, and one picture stopped me cold. Marcus at 18, arm around another boy at a school dance, both smiling like the world was theirs. My heart pounded. What had happened to that boy? Why had no one ever mentioned him? The questions multiplied as I hid the photo in my drawer, the weight of unspoken truths pressing down harder than any therapy session. Group sessions blurred into one another until the day Dr. Harlan brought up past patients as examples of success. My stomach dropped when he mentioned a young man from 10 years ago who had fully realigned after intense work. The description matched Marcus exactly, down to the high school sports record. I stared at my stepbrother waiting in the hallway and felt the ground shift beneath me. That night, I confronted him in the garage after Dad went to bed. You went through this, didn't you? That photo with the boy, what happened? Marcus slammed the toolbox shut so hard the echo rang. Stay out of my past, Leo. This is for your own good. But his voice cracked, and for the first time I saw fear in his eyes instead of anger. The misunderstanding escalated when Ezra showed up at the coffee shop where I worked part-time, slipping in during my shift despite my warnings. Marcus had followed me that day too, and when he saw Ezra waiting outside with flowers, he lost it. He stormed over and shoved Ezra against the brick wall. I told you to stay away. Ezra didn't fight back, just looked at me with hurt in his eyes. Leo, I just wanted to make sure you're okay. The betrayal cut both ways. Marcus dragged me home and locked my phone in the safe, claiming it was part of the program. Mom tried to mediate but ended up crying in the kitchen, whispering that she only wanted her boys happy. Dad stayed silent, his traditional values like a wall between us all. I sacrificed the only freedom I had left by promising Marcus I would finish the program if he let Ezra go unharmed. Inside, I was breaking, the psychological toll manifesting in sleepless nights and panic attacks in the shower. Flashbacks flooded me constantly. The first time Ezra and I drove to the lake and talked until sunrise, the way he listened when I described growing up feeling different. Those memories became my lifeline. Then came the turning point. During a mandatory family involvement day at the center, I snuck into the records room while Marcus argued with Dr. Harlan. Buried in an old file was Marcus's intake form from a decade ago, complete with a handwritten note from our stepdad. Fix this, or he's out of the family. And below it, a letter Marcus had written begging to be cured after his boyfriend had been sent away by his own parents. The truth slammed into me like a truck. My stepbrother wasn't just enforcing the rules, he had lived them, buried his own love to survive. I photocopied the pages with trembling hands and slipped them into my jacket. That evening I left the papers on Marcus's bed and waited. When he found them, his roar shook the house. You had no right. But the fight that followed brought everything into the open. Mom collapsed onto the couch in shock. Dad's face went pale as Marcus finally screamed the truth he had carried for years. The family secret wasn't just mine anymore. It was ours, and the foundation we had built on silence was crumbling fast. Ezra texted me later that night after I managed to borrow Mom's phone. Whatever happens, I'm here. His words gave me the strength to face the storm I had unleashed. The next days were chaos, arguments echoing through every room, accusations flying like shrapnel. Yet in the middle of it all, I felt something new, a quiet determination rising from the ruins. I was no longer the scared kid hiding in his room. I was Leo, in love with Ezra, and ready to fight for the life I deserved. The confrontation spilled into the living room like a dam breaking, Marcus pacing while Dad stood frozen by the fireplace, the old family photos on the mantel suddenly looking like lies. You knew, Marcus shouted at Dad, waving the copied papers. You threatened to kick me out if I didn't go to that place. Mom's hands covered her mouth, tears streaming as she looked between us. I thought it was the right thing, Dad whispered, his voice breaking for the first time in my life. The revelation hit like a physical blow, the dark secret that had poisoned us for years now exposed in all its ugliness. Marcus had sacrificed his first love to keep the family together, burying who he was so deep that he became the enforcer of the same pain. Now the cycle was repeating with me, and he couldn't watch it anymore. I stood in the middle of it, heart pounding, realizing my decision to dig up the past had forced everyone to face what we had all avoided. Ezra waited outside in his car that night, having driven from campus after my frantic text. When I slipped out the back door and climbed in, he pulled me into his arms without a word. The warmth of that embrace was the first real peace I had felt in weeks. You don't have to go back there, he said softly. We'll figure it out together. But leaving meant sacrificing the only home I had ever known. The next morning the house was a battlefield of suitcases and silence. Marcus sat at the kitchen table, head in his hands, finally admitting through sobs that he had been in love with that boy from the photo, and losing him had broken something inside him. Mom hugged him for the first time in years while Dad stared out the window, the weight of his choices crushing him. I packed my things quietly, each folded shirt a decision to choose myself. The betrayal from Marcus had started this, but his honesty now cracked open the door to healing. Yet misunderstandings lingered. Mom accused me of tearing the family apart, not understanding that the secret had been the real destroyer. I tried to explain that loving Ezra didn't make me less her son, but the words caught in my throat. Ezra helped me move into a small apartment near campus, his steady presence the anchor I needed. We spent nights talking until dawn, rebuilding my confidence one story at a time. He shared his own journey of coming out, the fear and the freedom, and I realized how much I had been missing by hiding. The psychological aftermath was brutal, nightmares of the therapy room mixing with guilt over Marcus's pain. But every morning Ezra made coffee and reminded me I was enough exactly as I was. Weeks passed, and the family fractures began to show glimmers of repair. Marcus called one evening, voice raw. I'm sorry, Leo. I was trying to protect you from what I went through, but I only made it worse. That call was a turning point, the first step toward forgiveness. Dad started attending a support group for parents, something he never would have considered before. Mom baked my favorite cookies and left them at the apartment door with a note that simply said, I love you. The road wasn't smooth, but the truth had set something free. Ezra and I walked through Lincoln Park hand in hand now, no more hiding in shadows. The vibrant leaves overhead matched the hope blooming inside me. Yet I knew the journey wasn't over. The family still had wounds to heal, and I still carried scars from the forced therapy. But for the first time, I saw a future where acceptance wasn't a dream, but a choice we all made together. The sacrifice of exposing the secret had cost us comfort, but it had given us something far more valuable: the chance to love openly. Moving out brought both freedom and loneliness, the small apartment feeling vast without the constant tension of home. Ezra stayed over most nights, his presence filling the space with laughter and quiet support that slowly stitched my broken pieces back together. We cooked simple meals together, watched old movies, and talked about everything except the family for a while, giving me space to breathe. But the pull of blood ties was strong. Marcus showed up unannounced one Saturday, standing awkwardly in the doorway with a six-pack of my favorite beer. "Can we talk?" he asked, eyes downcast. We sat on the tiny balcony as he poured out the rest of his story, how the therapy had left him numb for years, how he had married briefly to prove he was fixed, and divorced when he couldn't keep pretending. The betrayal I had felt toward him softened into understanding. He had been a victim too, shaped by the same pressures he later inflicted on me. "I thought if I made you go through it, maybe it would erase what happened to me," he admitted, voice thick. His sacrifice had been living a lie to keep Dad's approval, and now he was paying the price with regret. Dad called the next week, asking if we could meet for lunch, just the three of us. At the diner, he looked older, shoulders slumped as he apologized for the ultimatum he had given Marcus all those years ago. "I was scared," he said simply. "Scared of what people would think." Mom joined later, bringing homemade pie, and we sat in the booth like a real family for the first time in months. The misunderstandings cleared slowly, each honest conversation peeling away layers of pain. Ezra joined one dinner, nervous but kind, and to my surprise, Dad shook his hand and asked about his studies. Small steps, but each one felt like victory. Yet the climax built when the center contacted us about unpaid bills from my sessions, forcing another family meeting. Sitting around the old kitchen table, accusations flew again until Marcus stood up and declared he was done hiding. "I'm gay too," he said clearly, the words hanging in the air like liberation. Mom cried, but this time they were tears of relief. Dad nodded slowly, the weight lifting from his face. In that moment, the dark secret that had nearly destroyed us became the bridge to rebuilding. I reached for Ezra's hand under the table, his squeeze grounding me as emotions swirled. The psychological consequences of everything we had endured surfaced in waves. Nights where I woke up shaking from memories of the therapy room, but Ezra was always there to hold me until the panic passed. My growth came in quiet decisions, like enrolling in a support group for survivors of conversion attempts, where I met others who understood the journey. Marcus started seeing a real therapist, one who didn't promise to change him but helped him accept himself. The family dynamics shifted from rigid expectations to tentative acceptance, imperfect but real. Sacrifices continued, like me turning down a better job offer out of state so I could stay close during the healing process. Ezra sacrificed weekends at his own family events to be with me at ours. Through it all, our love deepened, no longer a secret but a source of strength. The city lights outside my apartment window now symbolized possibility instead of fear. I had faced the worst and emerged not broken but reshaped, ready to live authentically. The road ahead still held challenges, but with Ezra by my side and a family learning to love without conditions, I felt ready for whatever came next. The months that followed transformed our lives in ways I never imagined possible. Ezra and I found a bigger place together near the lake, a sunny one-bedroom where we could finally build something permanent without fear. Mornings started with coffee on the balcony, watching the water sparkle, his arm around me as we planned our days. The emotional weight that had pressed on my chest for so long lifted gradually, replaced by a quiet confidence I had never known. Marcus visited often, bringing his new boyfriend, a quiet teacher from the suburbs who made him smile in a way I hadn't seen since we were kids. Their relationship gave me hope that healing was possible at any age. Mom and Dad hosted family dinners where conversations flowed easier, the old tension replaced by careful questions about our lives. Dad even asked Ezra about his work with at-risk youth, listening with genuine interest. The societal pressures that once felt crushing now seemed smaller against the support we had built. I graduated community college and started a job at a community center helping young people navigate their identities, turning my pain into purpose. Ezra finished his degree and landed a position at the same place, our paths intertwining in the best way. We took weekend trips to Michigan, walking beaches hand in hand under open skies, the freedom tasting sweeter because we had fought for it. Misunderstandings still happened, like the time Mom accidentally used the wrong pronoun in front of relatives and had to correct herself, but each correction was progress. Betrayals from the past became lessons rather than wounds. The biggest growth came when I stood up at a local Pride event and shared my story publicly for the first time, Marcus in the audience nodding with pride. The applause wasn't just for me, but for all of us who had chosen truth over silence. Ezra proposed on a crisp fall evening in the same park where Marcus had first seen us, kneeling under the street lamps with a simple ring and the words I had waited my whole life to hear. "Will you build a life with me? No more hiding?" I said yes, through happy tears, the moment cinematic in its perfection. The family celebrated with us, Dad toasting to second chances and Mom hugging Ezra like her own son. The journey had tested every relationship, but it had strengthened the ones that mattered. I looked back at the boy who had been dragged to that therapy center and barely recognized him. In his place stood a man who understood that acceptance wasn't given. It was claimed through courage and love. As we danced at our small engagement party, surrounded by the people who had walked through fire with us, I felt complete. The dark secret that once threatened to destroy everything had instead illuminated the path to something better. True love, real family, and the freedom to be exactly who I was. The story wasn't over, but the chapter of fear had closed for good. True or false, family love can only be real when it survives the revelation of every hidden truth.